Hello and welcome to the Eighth Note Sessions. I'm Mike Shamil.
And I'm Devin Mullen.
And our guest today is Ian McCuen. Ian, how you doing today?
I'm all right. Doing all right.
Now, Ian describes himself as a purveyor of sorrow. He's got a few bedroom DIY folk albums, and we decided to bring him on the show to talk about that and some other more philosophy zone and esoteric level stuff. Ian, so you've been doing most of your work out of your home. Do you ever feel the need to go in a studio, or do you prefer the sort of enclosed environment and space that your bedroom provides?
I think for now, what I'm doing, it definitely calls for the isolating nature of kind of doing it in my room. I think it lends to the music and the material. I went to school actually for audio engineering, so I do love being in the studio and recording in the studio. I'd like to eventually, in future projects, probably expand to that, but I think for now it's very much the realm that I'm comfortable with, and I think that kind of breeds what it is. It's almost like another instrument, I suppose, in my music, is the fact that it's my room, and it's just me in the room with the instruments and the gear, and that's kind of part of the whole vibe.
And speaking of vibe, you have like this very whispery, kind of like Woody Guthrie meets like Phoebe Bridgers kind of sound and style.
Like that.
Where did that come from?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I never used to. I mean, the first time I've always sung, but in previous bands, I was always like a backup, like harmony vocal type singer. So I guess this was really, when I went solo, was really kind of like discovering my lead voice for the first time. And I think in part it's an intentional choice, just again to lend to the nature of the songs and the subject matter and the material, to kind of be this very delicate and whispery vocal register. But additionally, I think it's also comes from a place of almost like apprehension towards the fact that I'm the lead person now. So it's like, I don't really want to. I'm not.
You're not
quite
gonna
ready
go
to,
David Lee Roth and be all up in your face.
I'm not ready to project it fully yet, I guess. So I think it was both a conscious choice and also kind of just what happened when I started singing.
That's an interesting little tidbit, though, that you just shared. The kind of unwillingness, but also the intent behind displaying that unwillingness by not going with the typical in-your-face kind of lead vocals. Very fascinating.
And I'd say there's a great unity of effect in your artistic process, insofar as you're kind of hanging out in your bedroom, and also in the sort of trilogy you made. And songs of Fleeting Permanence. I mean, this delves pretty heavily into issues of mental health, of isolation, and all that. And he hears Woody Guthrie and Phoebe Bridgers. I definitely heard a lot of Elliott Smith in your writing. What is sort of the fundamental nature of sorrow that is such a creative propellant for you?
Well, I think that to use the word sorrow it's a very prevalent presence, I guess, in my own personal life, but in I think life in general, and a lot of times maybe isn't necessarily a realm that a lot of songwriters will go in, and I kind of wanted to just really plunge to the depths of that and see what that means in context of my own mental health and my own state. And
I mean, certainly a lot of songwriters do explore sorrow, though. I mean, that's the blues. But I think in our pre-interview conversation we talked about not wanting to sort of get into more poppy, positive escapism. This might be a more like cynical, grounded
Sure,
kind
yeah.
of escapism.
Yeah.
Like purging of emotion.
Yeah, honestly, purging is a good way to put it, because it's, you know, nothing, you know, there's plenty of pop escapism that I love, but, you know, you mentioned Elliott Smith, and he's a major influence on my work, and I think he...
You hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, more so than what I contend, more so than any songwriter that I can think of has, you know, touched on that undercurrent of human nature, and I wanted to go in that direction and avoid the pop escapism, and kind of really just you know, shed a light on and expose this very oft like shied away from material and realm of sorrow.
I mean, even in this year of 2021, issues of depression and anxiety can be very stigmatized to talk about.
Definitely.
There's beauty in having resonance with an artist like Elliott Smith, but there's also pain. Do you ever feel that engaging in a creative mode that is informed by one's own suffering, that there's a balance to strike where you're not reveling too much in the suffering or turning to it as a creative motivation too much?
Definitely.
How do you keep out of that?
I don't really know, but it is definitely a line that I'm cognizant of, and you know, because you don't, I really do try and make sure, I don't know how well I accomplish it, but I try and make sure that I don't like completely go the other end, and it's almost like a glorification of whatever the issue is, which again, I take, you know, a lot of my cues from Elliott Smith, because I think he was a master at that, and he, you know, was very, very heavy and depressing material that he dealt with, and he did it in such a succinct and relatable way, and but it was never to the point where it was like, oh man, I need to turn this. I mean, maybe if you listen to it for like hours on end for days and weeks, but you know, I find it comforting, you know, to be like, oh shit, that's real heavy, but also I can relate to that, and it makes me feel less alone.
Well, it's
comforting
to hear that sort of thing. If you feel that sort of thing, it's to be seen.
Yeah.
And sometimes being seen will save you, or whatever. So this trilogy of albums that you wrote was set from 18 to 24, which is a very exciting but also really, really difficult time in someone's life.
Yeah.
You said you've recorded several albums over the pandemic? We didn't get three.
Yes.
Okay. Was it written through this sort of self-examining lens, or given how much from the outside is sort of bleeding over into the songwriting process, whether it's the pandemic or the Capitol riots or the George Floyd protests, or, you know, this, that, and the other? What's motivating you and sort of catching your eye now in the writing process?
Well, actually, the records that I recorded last year, the material was actually written well before the pandemic. So it was more so that the pandemic afforded me the time to actually sit down and record it. Okay. But it's the material predates the pandemic by at least a few years. One of the three records I recorded last year is the that This Machine Kills Fascists, which is the protest song covers album. That was partially, I mean, I had always had the idea to do something like that, but like that was in part definitely inspired by everything that was going on last year, and you know, it kind of taking into context the moment of this very like kind of like era of like social conscious of everyone's kind of in their homes because of the pandemic, and kind of really having to sit with these things, and then all the protests last summer, and people kind of really had to I think because there was nothing else to do and we were all locked in our homes, it became a big moment of, I think, reflection, and a lot of people really sat with a lot of this stuff, maybe for the first time, or maybe it was the first time they thought of it in depth, but kind of just wanted to touch on that.
So
that era.
the artist as social critic not necessarily has to look to society and have that pervasive sense that something's not quite right, and we have to elect what thing we look at in particular. So what are some of the objects of your critique as an artist at this time?
Well, it's maybe a under the surface thing on Songs of Fleeting Permanence, but there was a bit of an eye turned towards critiquing the society within which we live that even creates the context of what a lot of people's maybe depression or anxiety might stem from. Like, yes, overall I'm mostly talking about my own personal inner feelings, which would be happening anyways, because that's the nature of mental illness, but then the fact that it can actually be heightened and worsened and
in the perverse way, maybe universal.
Yeah, thanks to the conditions that we currently live in, and then also moving forward with later material that I'll be releasing is kind of going more in an explicit direction with that stuff, and kind of looking at it head on, that kind of the outer influence of, you know, where we all are in society, and what leads to these moments of desolation and you know, personal I guess destitution.
I mean, to put it in my own poetic way, I heard sort of a future of robbed promise in the songs, and then I think that's certainly a resonant feeling for a lot of people our age.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, we grow up and, you know, we've been taught that, okay, this is how life is going to be. There's a certain framework and formula you must follow. And if you don't follow, bad things are going to happen.
Right.
And all this pressure to, like, fit within these constraints is overwhelming because they're such ridiculous constraints. And then you get to adulthood and then you see what things are really like. And you realize, man, I was fed, like, a ton of bullshit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, is, you know... And that's kind of the direction that I'm going in with this next record is those constraints that we're all supposed to fit under, and that it's actually your fault if you don't follow along. Oh, well,
shame.
You blew it. You're personally responsible for your own suffering, kind of thing. And that's just not, at least in my belief, the case. And that's kind of what this next record is going to be about, is talking about how it's not our fault as individuals, but rather a concocted world.
More systemic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's systemic issues that we're all dealing with, but we've been led to believe that it's personal failure that has brought us any kind of suffering or oppression.
Yeah, that whole, you know, veil of, well, you're just not good enough. You know, that lie.
Yeah.
I mean, I know something that really stuck out to me was anecdotes of people having to go back to the office after, you know, being able to actually enjoy working for once from home, and just the absolute heartbreak. You know, I'm very curious if we'll ever bounce back to quote-unquote normal, but a major part of me hopes we don't. I'd rather,
definitely,
you know, we have something new in the works.
Yeah.
So walking in the footsteps of artists who you draw clear inspiration from, while also having a strong sense to be seen, to be yourself, how's that challenge approached for you?
It's it's difficult, because I never want to go too far in one direction where it's basically I'm like a, you know, I might as well just be a cover artist of Elliott Smith or whoever it is. And so trying to find, very much going in his footsteps, but also finding my own voice within that is definitely a thing that is very present in my mind when I'm writing, because like I said before, I take so many cues from him and what he does, but I want that to be a thing that is enveloped in my work and just becomes one piece of amongst many other pieces that come together to form my musicianship and my songwriting and
ultimately your story.
Exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's important to find that part of your art that really shows the messages and the ideas that that you have from your perspective, your unique perspective, and find a way to bring that forward. I had some curiosity. I noticed that as I listened to your recordings from your first album, all the way up to your most recent release, the cover album, I noticed that you were starting to do a little bit more with electric versions of tracks. Like you had, on your cover album, you had released a song that was your traditional style, that bedroom folk kind of stuff. And then you kind of decided to start taking that song and giving it a different kind of spin. And I found that really fascinating. Is the next album going to be a little bit more along those lines? Is it going to show some more, how should I put this, heavy and heightened sounds coming from the instrumentation and less of a low-fi acoustic kind of thing, but really bring the electric instruments out more? Definitely,
yeah. The vibe and the instrumentation of Songs of Fleeting Permanence was very much a conscious choice to keep it very much in the realm of lo-fi, homespun kind of thing. And with these next records, I definitely still has that air of lo-fi and homespun, because that's what they are, made in my bedroom. But
made with love, or something.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's definitely. I wanted to expand on the sonic palette a lot more, and there is definitely more moments of heavier instrumentation, layered instrumentation, a lot more things going on, bringing out the electric instruments much more than the acoustic ones, and kind of finding that balance through there, but also having some moments where maybe the electric instruments outshine the acoustic ones, and actually the two records, one is very much a combination of all those sounds and like an expansion of all those sounds, but the second one is actually predominantly electric, so I kind of wanted to explore that a lot too. Yeah, always looking to keep evolving my sound, and I hope, my intent is to, as my career progresses, hopefully, is with each record explore a new type of sonic palette and introduce new sounds.
So I think it would be perhaps unfair to be couching you as this singular entity, completely in a vacuum, untouched, and
this is his genre, and this is where he stays in that groove.
Something we talk a lot about is the multitude of music scenes in the city of Buffalo. So I'm just curious, associated acts that you play with or just personally admire locally.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of artists that I've played with over the years that I love, and too many to probably list off the top of my head. But I've played a bunch with Stress Dolls, Chelsea O. I love what she's doing. I'm also a big fan of Tough Old Bird, who I have a show with on Saturday. I love their sound. It's very classic Americana. I think they hit the nail on the head with that. I'm a big fan of Timothy Ellis and what he's doing. He has a very unique voice and a keen songwriting style. I've played in a lot of different, touched on different scenes, so to speak, because there's no, I guess, one particular pocket where I fit. But it's...
Well, right, not benign enough for a coffee house,
Yeah.
not quite heavy enough for a dive bar. It's
Exactly,
this weird
yeah.
mediated position.
Yeah, so it's a weird place to be in. So, kind of trying to find that niche between exactly coffee house and dive bar kind of thing, which I guess is maybe a good description
A
of
dive
music.
cafe?
Yeah.
You find like pill bottles on the couch or something? I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I might have to try and open something like that.
New business venture.
Now I just need the investors.
Yeah.
You put the bar and barista. All right.
We're only serving PBR coffee. This way we satisfy
blend.
both.
Yeah.
So I think, my friend, we are just about at time. I got one more question. Do you got one more question?
Go ahead and shoot yours, and I'll throw out mine right in after.
Beautiful. So the reason why I asked you on this show is I've seen you play twice at this point. I actually mixed sound to one of your shows back in the Tabernacle.
Yeah, that's right.
We made it through that. And I found a lot of personal resonance in how you create and what the subject matter is. I make music in my bedroom, and it's very different from what you do, but it has the same kind of seed to it. There are so many young men who are artists who struggle with what I will generically call illnesses of invisibility, who have a creative voice but maybe don't necessarily have the visibility.
Sure.
That kind of validation and affirmation to what they're doing. Do you have any potential words of encouragement or just something to chew on for anyone who may be where you were when you were writing Songs of Fleeting Permanence?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that anybody really in those positions needs is just to know that, it, not just that you're not alone, but that, it's also acceptable to be in that realm, because I think so much of American society is about, kind of like we touched on before, is bettering yourself despite not having the tools to be able to do it, and then getting blamed for not succeeding at it. And I think the recognition that it's acceptable to be, struggling, because we all are in the face of, what we have going on in society, but additionally for people who are struggling with mental illness, and especially, like you said, men, because I think there's very much that stigma there that is rooted very much in patriarchy, that you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to feel that. You're not allowed to go to those places. And so I guess it's just, it's a very basic thing to say, and it's not really like necessarily a helpful answer, but like just knowing that, like, no, you are allowed to do that, like, and you should. I think there's value in exploring those spaces and recognizing those feelings and emotions that occur.
Now, where do you find, if you're talking to a younger musician, where would you recommend they reach out for support on those matters? Where would you want to tell your younger self, to look for help with these things?
Well, a lot of it can be found in just the sense of, in particular, music industry, that just the sense of community, because it is, like anything in any industry, music can be a very grueling and isolating thing to do. So just kind of building that community and relying on fellow artists to be there, but also at the same time knowing that, like, you you don't owe them anything and they don't owe you anything, and not allowing yourself to, I guess, be taken advantage of. Because I think people can be easily pushed in certain directions if, you know, you're trying to navigate an industry like the music industry. And
a lot of sharks in the water.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So just knowing where to find, you know, that sense of community, but also not completely relying on every hand that's going to stick, you know, they're going to be stuck in the pot, kind of being like, here you go. But yeah.
That's some good advice. Well, we appreciate you spending some time with us today. We appreciate the folks at home for watching this. And with that, this has been the Eighth Note Sessions. I'm Mike Shamil.
And I'm Devin Mullen.
And our guest today was Ian McCuen. Ian, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I don't want to leave this bed. There's nothing for me outside of these four walls. I don't want to lift my head. This pillow calls me back to where I was. I don't want to be misread. The things I do.
The Eighth Note Sessions are produced by Music is Art. Help keep programs like this going by donating today at musicasart.org. Thank you for listening.